So thank you so much for joining us today. Today we'll have our cooking demo, which is we're acknowledging Nutrition Month. And I'm so happy to be with all of you today. I am Rose, the Healthy Promotion and Education Coordinator with Health Services at Algonquin College. So before we get started, we're going to share a couple of housekeeping items. So along the bottom of the screen, you will find a chat button. Please feel free to use this feature if you have comments you would like to share with us. If you have any questions, you can type them into the Q&A tab along the bottom of your screen. And we will allow good timing to answer all your questions. The other thing that you can do, you can use the feature of raise hand, and we will be able to unmute you and you could ask your question live. Please note this event will be recorded. And now, let's move to some introductions of the team before we get our cooking demo. Moving to Judy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jody. I work at the Pembroke campus of Algonquin College as the Marketing, Event Planning, and Recruitment Coordinator, and I'm so happy to be here today. We have been making a lot of big strides in our indigenization journey at the Pembroke campus, so it's really special to be here today. And I'd like to pass the virtual mic along to Vanessa.
Hello, everybody. My name is Vanessa Sear. I work at the Carleton Center for Indigenous Initiatives at Carleton University. And I'm here today and I will be, actually, I guess that's it for me as far as introductions.
Hi, so my name is Marie-Pierre. I'm a project manager at the First People Innovation Center. And I hope you're gonna like the activity and you're gonna learn more about food and healthy way to eat it. So I'm passing the mic to Tatiana.
Hi everyone, my name is Tatiana Hunt. I'm the registered dietitian here with you guys today. I work out of Loblaw, so I have 4 locations in Ottawa. So I cover College Square and Maribel, which are really close to Algonquin College. And then I also cover Loblaw South Keys and Loblaw Enbell. So in my practice, I do practice a weight inclusive approach, also known as HAZE approach, which stands for health at every size. So this meaning that health can really look different to each and one of us, and there is no one size or shape that determines our health status. So along with that, I have a strong passion for sports nutrition, helping people guide them through different health conditions, talking about different meal planning tips and tricks. So I have a variety of things I love to do. At Loblaws, we do offer one-on-one services as well as group webinars and group programming, virtual cooking classes like this. And then we also do corporate and community presentations. I'm so excited to be here with you guys today and to explore some new recipes. They're new recipes for me, and I'm hoping that they're new to you so we can explore them together. So thanks so much for having me today, guys.
Thank you so much, everyone, for the introduction. So today, our cooking demo, we will have 2 recipes. So the main dish is bannock burger with a side salad, adapted from Plate Visuals, dietitians working with First Nations group Saskatchewan. And the side dish will be oatmeal chocolate lentil bites. I'm really looking forward for this one. Adapted from Nutrition Month 2021 recipe ebook. So I will just now turn the virtual mic to Vanessa to talk shortly about food and Indigenous culture.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to take this time right now actually to acknowledge the location that we're on, our cooking demo on. We are on the traditional unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Nations. And I'll go on to share with you a little bit about Indigenous cooking. I grew up on Nipissing First Nations most of my life until I left as an adult. I left my First Nations when I became an adult. But I grew up, both my parents are Ojibwe, and we grew up with cooking where my mother cooked very basic foods in a sense that she didn't use a lot of spices. There was a lot of just pepper, salt and pepper. A lot of our meats, well, the majority of our meats and fish were caught. So we would have had moose, deer, beaver, fish, a variety of fish from Lake Nipissing, where I grew up on. So yeah, so a lot of those, a lot of that food is what I grew up on. And it wasn't until I left my community, I began to eat more other, like beef, stuff that you would buy in the grocery store. We did eat chicken, I guess, but our chicken, I guess, in a sense, we didn't always have it. We had partridge. So that would have been the meat that we would have had, or we would have had duck. Goose we had periodically. That was a delicacy, I guess, or something that we appreciated when we did get it. But yeah, so growing up and eating that kind of food and having to learn how to eat foods from the grocery store was interesting. My mother also had a garden, so all of our vegetables came from the garden. So yeah, so it was really interesting to grow up eating foods from the land. And when we did that, it was really important that we made sure that when my family caught food, so any food that was caught by my brothers and my father, it was caught and with respect. And when I say that is when after they would catch the whatever animal that they were catching or fish, they would put tobacco down. We'd have tobacco. They always hunted with tobacco, and they'd put that tobacco down to the earth and thank that animal for giving up its life in order for us to survive. So it was really important that part happened, because we never hunted an animal or took an animal's life for a trophy or for just for the sake of doing it. There was always, it was for our livelihood. So it was really about respecting the animal, respecting the land. So yeah, so I just wanted to share that really quickly with you. If anybody had any questions, I guess when it comes to question period, by all means, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Vanessa. It's so interesting to hear everyone's food practices, because they range widely, right? And it's so interesting to hear how other people were raised and, you know, their practices. So thank you so much. So now we're going to dive into our first recipe. I just wanted to note that before we get started, for any of those who are following along and cooking the recipe with me, if you could just put your oven at 350 to start preheating so that it's ready to go once we have those oatmeal chocolate lentil bites ready to go. So we are going to start with that recipe, but I just wanted to mention that if you ever get a recipe that, you know, maybe the yield, so the serving size is too large, or maybe you want to make it larger, feel free to adapt and alter the recipe as needed. The one thing I do want to caution you on, in baking, it's best not to manipulate the recipe too much, because baking can be so sensitive with the amounts. So I just encourage you, say it makes a huge batch and there's no way you're going to eat it all, or maybe you will, but always have that option to pop it in the freezer and use at a later date. Maybe with the burgers we're going to be making, maybe it makes too many patties for your household. And you can pop those in the freezer and pull them out for a quick, a quick meal one night. So don't be afraid to kind of manipulate recipes, half them, double them, do whatever you need to do to make it right for your household. So as I said, we're going to start with the oatmeal chocolate lentil bites, and I have the recipe here. So all these recipes are new to me as well. So it's really fun to explore these new recipes together. So as I said, hopefully you've had a chance to preheat your oven to 350. And now we're going to get started in introducing the ingredients. So I'm going to introduce the ingredients for each recipe right before we make it, just so we don't get overwhelmed with too many ingredients. So to start off, we're going to need some lentils for our oatmeal chocolate lentil bites. And the recipe does say you can use canned or dried. Just keep in mind, if you are going to use dried, you will need to take an extra step and prep those lentils before. So cooking them in some water to make them ready for the recipe. Whereas if you're using canned, they are already ready to go, and that's the convenience of canned. Keep in mind, they are a little bit more pricier than the dried lentils. So if you're kind of trying to follow a budget, or you want to be a little cost effective, you can go for the dried, and they come in bulk, and you can just use them. And maybe you make them the morning if you know that in the afternoon you're going to be baking, or the day before, so they're ready for quick use. But today we will be using canned, and I do want to note the type of lentil is very important. So I don't know if you've ever seen the red split lentils. Those ones cook really, really quick, and they kind of disintegrate into the meal. So great for like soups and stews or thickeners, whereas green or brown lentils keep their shape, and they do take a little bit longer to cook. So if you want them to be the star of the meal, definitely want to go for those green or brown. As I mentioned, canned can be a great option, but there's something we do want to be a little bit mindful of when we're choosing canned. We want to look at the nutrition facts label. And often with canned products, they're a little bit higher in sodium to help preserve that item. So for the no-name brand, they are great for price, but can be a little bit higher in sodium. So if you look at the sodium, we do want to aim for anything lower than 10%. Here we notice that mine says 13%, and that's no worries, because this is one product out of our entire day, but it's just something we want to be mindful of when we're choosing multiple products. But another thing, and what we're going to do today, is we can rinse off that extra sodium. So when we strain them, take that time to just rinse them off thoroughly so that we can drain off all that extra sodium. So that's all that to say, this is what we'll be using in our oatmeal chocolate lentil bites. And then the next ingredient is water. So I'll be grabbing that from the tap when we go to use it. And then it does say margarine. I am using what's in my fridge. So I have a stick of butter. So margarine or butter, whatever you have on hand is perfectly fine, and whatever suits you best. And then we'll be using some brown sugar. Mine has been used, so it's in a Ziploc to make sure it doesn't go hard. But if yours is new, we'll just pop that open. Then we'll be using some vanilla extract. I will be using a whole egg, where on the recipe here, it does say flax egg as another option. So maybe you kind of move towards more vegetarian or vegan diet and you don't eat eggs, or maybe you have an egg allergy, that's perfectly fine. So this flax egg is another option. So it would be 1 tablespoon of flaxseed and 3 tablespoons of water to make that flax egg. So that's another option if that's what you'd like to do, but I will be using a whole egg. Also keep in mind, eggs can come in different colors, and I always get questions, is one better than the other? And it's actually super sweet that they're all the exact same. It just depends on the color of the chicken, determines the color of the egg. So whatever egg you have on hand, that will do the job perfectly. And then moving on to the flour. Please use whatever flour you have on hand. I will be using a gluten-free 1-to-1 flour for this recipe. But if you have a white all-purpose flour, a whole wheat flour, or maybe an almond flour, whatever suits you best. So I will be using this one today. And then we'll be using oats. So I have my oats here. I also have some of the Quaker oats on hand too. So I always have a variety of ingredients. Whatever is best suited for you is awesome for the recipe. And then we have our baking powder. So that, and then our cinnamon. And then my favorite part of the entire thing, chocolate chips. So that's what we'll be using today. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to open my can of lentils over at the sink, and I'm going to, as I said, put them in my strainer, really rinse them off, and then pop them into my blender. Or if you have a food processor, either does the job perfectly. I will be using a blender today. So I'm gonna go over there and do that, and I encourage you to do the same, and then we'll meet back here. Great. So as you see here, I've rinsed off my lentils, gave them a good shake. You can use your hands to just toss them around to really drain off any extra sodium that we don't actually need. And then the recipe does say to use 1 cup of lentils. So I'm going to take a cup of lentils and pop it into my blender. So 1 cup, and I'm going to pop it in there. And now it encourages us to blend them. And I'm going to put myself on mute so I don't bother you with some loud noise. But I'm going to blend them until they're a smooth texture. Popping you on mute, and we'll meet back here.
So I think while Tatiana comes back, I'm wondering if there are any other Indigenous inspired recipes that have lentil as well. Like maybe Vanessa or Marie-Pierre have an idea. No.
We didn't, my mother didn't necessarily cook with, she did cook with lentils, but it was more of, we were more of a meat, potatoes, and vegetable growing up. There weren't a lot of beans. She did make, she did make the navy beans and stuff, but or a pea soup or kind of thing. But that wasn't something that was that we ate a lot of. And I'm not sure why, because it was there. But she, I think she just went with the vegetables and the meat and the potatoes kind of thing. Stews, soups.
Yeah, interesting. I think like for me, I came from the Middle East, and we used lentil in some recipes. Like I feel the good thing about it that it gives you that protein, but it's plant-based protein. So like if we want to do something that everyone can eat, like not supposed to be like protein from meat, we will go with lentil or beans. So it's interesting like to see how each culture comes in with different food.
Awesome. So yeah, lentils definitely a great source of protein. And if you're more of an animal or plant-based eater, then this would be a great source of protein for you in replace of any animal meats. So now we're going to go ahead and keep following the recipe. And now it says to add your margarine, or in my case, the butter. I just split it in half here. And then our brown sugar, which is half a cup. So if you want to go ahead and measure that out.
Tatiana, when we say brown sugar, like are the calories different from white sugar, or is it more like the brown sugar, more content of fibers? Like what's the difference exactly? I'm not aware, but
yeah. So sugar actually is the exact same in our bodies. It's processed the same. Our bodies use sugar. It's the exact same. The color of the sugar has just a different taste to it. So you'll find that the brown sugar gives it a bit different taste, whereas a white sugar might just kind of go with the mixture of the recipe, and it doesn't give off its taste. It just gives sweetness. So I find that brown sugar gives that extra flavor.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that goes for all sugars. So even natural sugars that you find in fruits, our bodies process sugars the exact same. Sugar is just a unit of energy, and our body uses it as energy. The only thing we notice from fruit is other nutrients come along with that sugar, whereas 1 or half a cup of brown sugar is just brown sugar. It doesn't have any other drivers of nutrients. So this is why we kind of encourage some more fruits as our sugar sources. So half a cup of brown sugar is added, and now we're going to do half a teaspoon of vanilla. If you're like me and love vanilla, sometimes I add a little bit extra. Okay, perfect. Looking at our recipe here, and then it says to add the egg. So let's crack our egg and pop that in there. Perfect. Okay. And now we're going to go back and blend that to a smooth. So I'm going to pop you on mute again so I don't bother you with my noise.
Oh, Jody, when you don't have a blender, you use good old arm power. Sometimes a fork or a masher. Yeah, I do agree. Sometimes, like, I want to do something a little bit late, like 8 or 9 p.m. and my children will be sleeping. So I'll do that, like just the manual blending. But like also I'm not really a good fan of blenders because like I feel myself more just into having that manually rather than just going with the blender option. But I think it depends, like what each of us prefers.
When I was a student, I certainly wasn't, I didn't have the availability of a blender. So, but I never let that hold me back from continuing to bake and things like that. So it just takes a little bit more effort.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll see now it's like very a smooth texture, all ready to go, nice and blended up. So we're just gonna put that aside, and we're actually gonna start combining the dry ingredients, okay? So in a large bowl, it says combine the flour. So as I mentioned, I'll be using the gluten-free flour today, and it says 2/3. So you can take a 1/3 cup and do 2 leveled out measures of that. And then it calls for 1 cup of oats. So whatever oats you have is perfect. One thing I've learned with baking is it's really important to follow the recipe pretty exact, especially with the measurements, because if you have too much liquid or too much dry, it can really change the outcome of the product. So it's really trying to follow those little things, like adding a little bit of vanilla won't change it too much. And then, okay, so then we're gonna add in our baking powder, which calls for half a teaspoon. So make sure we level that out. Perfect. And then cinnamon is half a teaspoon as well. I love cinnamon. And I tried this recipe last week just to try it out. And I did add a little extra cinnamon, but not too much extra, but just more of a heaping teaspoon because I love the taste of that. Okay, and now I'm just gonna mix that up just to combine it all. You can use a spoon. I'm just using a whisk, whatever works best for you. And is anyone in the crowd following along, or are you guys just watching today? You want to let us know in the chat box. And then we're going to add the wet lentil to the dry ingredient. Okay, so we're going to add that in. smelling delicious. I don't know if you guys are following or making the recipe at home, noticing the great smells that are coming. Perfect. So try and get out as much as you can. Keep the recipe right. Great. So now it says for us to just mix it up. Try and get all that wet combined with that dry. I'm not able to see the chat box. So Rose, would you be able to tell me if anyone mentioned if they're following along?
Yeah, so the folks from Onaki are following along and they are taking eager notes.
Okay, so no one's making the recipe today. We're gonna try it later.
We have some attendees without a video, so maybe they are doing the recipe with you. I'm not sure. But yeah, you will see us like maybe, are you doing that from your home? We're coming after we finish to taste the bites. Imagine all of us coming.
I'll be eating all these.
Right.
Okay, so now it's all combined. You'll see here, it's still like a chunkier texture, but that's perfect. That's exactly what we need. And now we're gonna add in half a cup of our chocolate chips. And if you're generous, you can add a little bit more. If you love chocolate like me, never hurts to add too much. And you can use whatever chocolate suits you. I like the milk chocolate. Sometimes I like the dark chocolate, depending on how sweet the recipe is. So after this time you're making it, next time you make it, you can feel free to make any changes to best suit you and your taste bud. So now I'm gonna get my hands dirty and I'm just gonna mix this up with my hands. Just so those chocolate chips are evenly spread in there. You'll notice it is a pretty wet kind of mixture. That's perfectly okay. So now what I'm gonna do is I have a sheet pan here and I put parchment paper on it. If you don't have parchment paper, that's perfectly okay as well. You can just lightly grease the pan with any margarine or butter that you have at home. And I like to take a spoon just to kind of portion out a amount, or you can just make balls. And I like to make them into little bite-sized balls. I make mine about this big. And I'm just gonna put them out on my cookie sheet. And then depending on the size of the bites that you made, it will kind of alter the cook time. So the recipe does say anywhere from 12 to 14 minutes. And I'm gonna put them in for 12 and then check them. But depending on the size, if you made them a bit bigger, last week I made them really big and they needed more than 14 minutes. So really just trying to figure out when they're done. And my best way of doing it is taking a toothpick and poking it through the middle. And if any ingredients come out like that wetness, you know they need a little bit longer. Okay, almost done here.
And I think, Tatiana, like we can save what's left. So like making those bites is really great because you will have like some good portion, I think. Like you have made around 10 or more. So
10 exactly, actually, yeah. And like I said, if you don't feel like you're gonna use them right away, pop them in the freezer and pull them out when you want a snack or maybe a sweet treat after a meal. They're awesome. So I'm gonna quickly wash my hands and I'll meet you back here.
Sounds good. So what other like desserts or main dessert that's known for Indigenous culture? I know maybe there are differences, but I'm really interested to know what you have.
Okay, so for desserts, my family made, so my mother would make blueberry pie, which was something that we had access to because the berries. So we had to pick as a little girl, we had to pick berries and all the berries. So for strawberries, we picked wild strawberries. It took forever to pick them because they were so much tinier than the ones that we buy in the store today. But yeah, so a lot of our desserts were done with the berries that my mother would pick. One of them that was really popular was where she would take a fry bread, which is similar to bannock, but it's a fry bread, so it's fried in grease.
Mm-hmm.
And then she would take it out and she would make a blueberry sauce or a strawberry sauce. And she would pour it on top and she would whip up some Cool Whip or not Cool Whip, some cream, heavy cream, and she would add a little bit of sugar to it because there was already enough sugar in the berries, the blueberries.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and she would pour it and she would put that on top, and that would be a dessert that we would have. And that was probably one of our favorite desserts, along with the blueberry pie.
Wow, sounds delicious.
Yes.
Now I want to make that. Sounds so good. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to the bannock, and I will admit this is my first time. Well, other than last week, I did try it. This is my first time making bannock. So I'm gonna just show you the ingredients that we'll be using today. So for this recipe, I will be using the all-purpose flour, not the gluten-free flour. So that, as I said, and once I've kind of gone through a little bit of the first steps, we're going to go back to Vanessa. She's the pro of bannock, and she can give us some tips about bannock because she helped me a lot last week. So a few tips I'll share with you that she shared with me, and that worked really, really well. So we'll be using that, the oats as well.
So Tatiana, sorry, we're starting with the bannock now, like the main,
yes.
We're preparing for the main dish now. Okay. Sounds good.
Sorry, yes, we're gonna switch over. So while the lentils are popped in the oven, I have my timer on here. I put it for 12 minutes and then we'll check that. But now we're gonna move over to the bannock burgers, and we're gonna start with the bannock. So that's gonna act as our bun. So those are the ingredients that we're gonna start with. So we're gonna use some salt, some of the oats, the flour. It calls for some baking powder. So notice how there's similar ingredients to our lentil bites, which is great, so that we don't have so many things out on the counter. It's very, very easy to follow along. Some vegetable oil, and then I have my milk still in the fridge, just making sure it's still chilled for us. So when we need it, I'll go grab that. So you will notice that it says to preheat our oven at 400 degrees. So as soon as those lentil bites are out, I'm gonna turn up that oven so that it's ready for the bannock. But right now we're gonna kind of skip that step. So now we're gonna measure out the flour, and it says 3 cups of flour. And another great tip that Vanessa shared with me, once we get all our ingredients ready, we are going to be kneading the mixture, kind of like you knead bread. And she mentioned not to over knead it. So she can talk more about that in a second. But I found that really well. So just knead it till it's nice and evenly combined. It looks like a smooth texture, but we don't want to over knead it. Great. So this can get a little messy. You see, I'm full of flour, but it's fun. Now we're going to add the oats. So 1.5 cup of the oats. Is anyone getting hungry watching this? Because I'm getting hungry doing it. And it's like close to lunchtime, or if not already lunchtime. So I'm sure a lot of people are hungry. So then we're gonna do 2 tablespoons of the baking powder.
I remember Vanessa mentioned something that she did not use oatmeal, right? Oats.
Yeah, so Vanessa said that traditionally, so I'll let her chat a little bit more about traditional bannock, but apparently they don't usually add the oats, but I think it's added here just for added fiber. But Vanessa, if you want to talk more about that, I'm going to go ahead and add the salt and then mix it.
For sure. Yeah, so oatmeal isn't necessarily a something that we would put. That would be something that was our breakfast, or my mom would make oatmeal cookies. I guess that was some of where our oatmeal went. But yeah, in the bannock, it was just we had just flour, water, salt, baking powder, and that's it. There was nothing else. They didn't, oh, and sorry, lard. We would use lard as opposed to oil. And actually, it was funny that you talk about the oatmeal when we're mixing it. When my mom was teaching me how to make it as a little girl, she would tell me that she said you'd want it to have an oatmeal consistency. So yes, I guess oatmeal was put in there somehow, but it wasn't necessarily oatmeal. It was more of a term to use to describe how to mix it. So yeah, and then kneading it, making sure not to over knead it, because when over kneading the bread, it becomes more dense. Now, if you're from out west, in the plains, they would make it and knead it a lot more so that it would become more dense, and that's how they would have their bannock. But I know in our community here in Ontario, kneading the bannock, over kneading the bannock, we liked our bannock to be nice and high and fluffy. So yeah, so I'll leave it at that. If there's any questions.
Awesome. So I'm going to be now adding the 3rd cup of vegetable oil. So I've already combined all that ingredients, just gave it a quick stir. So now I'm going to add that. And then we're going to also add the 1.5 cups of milk, whatever type of milk you have on hand. I use cow's milk, but you could use other milks as well. So now I'm going to go ahead and mix this up. And while I'm mixing this up, I just want to note that the recipe does say that we are going to flatten it out on a sheet pan. But again, Vanessa gave me another great tip, which I found worked perfectly when I tried this recipe last week, was to use like a cookie cutter, or if you have a cookie cutter, use the top of a cup, or in this case, because I wanted my the buns to be a little bit bigger, I'm using just a plastic container to help shape it out. So once we're done the kneading, we can get started with that. I'm just giving it a quick mix, and then I'm going to get my hands dirty because I find your hands just work so much better. Just going to fold it into each other, and then once we have a good consistency, like a little bit of a ball, I'll take it out and knead it a little bit nicer. All combining here.
So I think you can use bannock with like dessert, as it's mentioned in the chat, like jam and bannock for dessert. And for today, for example, we're doing, okay, bannock and beans. And for today, we're having bannock and burger. So like you can really actually use it as, I think, the same. I use bread, right? It's almost like the same. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so Vanessa would be able to speak to it more, but I'm sure you could just eat it. When I made this last week to test the recipe, my family was eating it for breakfast with like peanut butter and jam on top of it. So you can really play with it for sure. And it would be a great recipe to have on hand to throw in the freezer and pull out when you need a carbohydrate at a meal or a snack.
This is also a good idea, like doing that in the weekend where I have more time and then saving it in the freezer. Okay. But I think it tastes better when it's fresh.
Yes, and my family loved it warm. Vanessa, did you guys usually traditionally eat it warm, or maybe you already mentioned that, but I was busy making it, so I didn't hear.
Yeah, no, normally, yeah, we did eat it warm for the reason that when my mother made it, so she usually made it with our meals. So we would have it with supper. And it was never, she would take it out of the oven. And because I had 7 brothers and 3 sisters, there was a lot of us sitting around the dinner table. It never sat long enough to get warm or to get cooled off. So what she always made enough for that specific meal. So we always had enough for 1 or 2 of them. And she always made them in the buns size. It just made it easier for her to hand them out to all of us, to give everybody, made sure everybody had some. As opposed to making a big one. She did make the big ones as well, where she would make it just full in a pan on its own, but she found it easier just to make the smaller ones, and then we all got to pick from there. And yeah, so we never got it cold. There was never any leftovers. So
it was too good.
Yes. Yes, and we also had it. So I share this. They were giving examples on how it was eaten. And another way that we would eat it is if for whatever reason we didn't have bread that morning in the house, which would happen having a big family. If my mom didn't have time to make bread the night before, she would make it in the morning, and that would be what she would use to make our lunches to go to school. So we would have those. And it was funny because I didn't like it that I would always be like, oh, I don't want that for a sandwich. I want bread like everybody else. I want it to be the same as everybody else at school.
Yeah.
But then when I would get to school and I would take it out of the package, I'd always have students would say they'd want to trade my lunch. They'd want to trade the sandwiches because they all want, and I would always trade it out because I wanted the bread like everybody else. And everybody else wanted my lunch. So I would switch out with somebody else.
That's too funny. We always want what we can't have. Oh, my timer is going on for those lentil bites. So I'm just gonna have a quick look at those.
Yeah, I think at school, we just look at what other kids have. And then going back home, mommy, I want that. I saw, like, it's really funny.
So as I mentioned, I like to use a toothpick just to check it. So I'm gonna quickly check them. So they're all done. There they are. When they cool, I will show you them a little bit more and we can try them. So I will note the first time I stuck my toothpick in, I got in the middle of a chocolate chip. So of course that's gonna come out a little melted. So then I did it again on the other side of the toothpick in a different one in the middle, and it came out clean. So that's a good indicator that they're done. As mentioned, the bannock does need to be at a higher heat temperature. So we're gonna pop the oven up to 400 now. Perfect. And I wish I had a rolling pin, but I do not. So I am just pushing out the bannock to get ready to use my cookie cutter, we'll call it, my plastic container to shape it out. And you can really make any size you want of the buns. Last week when I tried this recipe, I used the top of a cup. And it was quite a narrow size cup. And I did find, I made my burgers quite big, and I found that the bannock was a little too small. So I'm gonna go for a bigger size this week. And I'm just going to push this out to be about a little bit of an inch thick, because the recipe does say to use one piece of bannock on top and one piece of bannock on the bottom. The other thing you could do, I guess, is make them a bit thicker and then cut them in the middle like a bun. Some of my family members were doing that because we got to taste the recipe together after. And they thought it was to cut. And I was like, no, one goes on top, one goes on bottom. But as I said, make it to what is best for you, right? Whatever is best suited your taste buds and the way you like it presented. So this is nice and flat. Rolling pin would save you a lot of work. I thought I had one, but I don't know what I did with it. Maybe I broke it, never replaced it. You know when that happens, when you you break something and you don't remember to replace it, and then you go, oh, that's what I broke and that's what I need. So same thing, I'm gonna use parchment paper on a sheet pan, and I'm gonna take my cookie cutter and I'm just going to push down and make little circles like this. So you can make them as thin as you want. I like them a bit thicker because it tastes so good. I want lots of it. I'm like Vanessa's family. Eat it till it's gone because it's so tasty. I don't know if mine would last in the freezer. I'd have nothing left. Last time I was like, oh, I could freeze those. No, it was gone. Gone before I had the chance to freeze them, which tells you I made a good recipe. The whole family eats it. So to me, these kind of almost look like little hamburger patties. Those out. And then you'll notice you'll have some holes. So what I did last time was just re-kneaded it and put it together and made shapes. So I'll bring it all back together and quickly make a couple more. Vanessa, is this looking similar to the bannock you had growing up? I hope so.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. It looks a little heavier, the dough, than what I'm used to seeing. But I mean, this does, keeping in mind there is oatmeal in here, so it is going to have a different texture to it. It won't necessarily be the same as what. And with ours, we didn't use milk or oil. We used water. We used water. So there again, the consistency will be a little thick, heavier than the water.
How thick would you guys make yours, Vanessa? I know you said you would make them into little buns as well, your mom would, but was it usually like an inch or?
I would say maybe about 1.5 to 2 inches. Like they were quite, they were quite thick. And then once they would rise, they would be bigger, but we never necessarily use them for a bun for a burger. So in this case, we would make them, if I was making them for my family, I would make them a little thinner just because they are going to be with a burger. So you wouldn't want them to be too big. So yeah, so I think going a little smaller is a good idea.
Yeah, so for me, these ones I'm making quite thick so that my family can cut them in half if they want to. Because apparently that's the way they like to do it. I think they're stuck in their ways of how a bun should be, but that's okay, whatever suits them. So I'm just making mine a bit thicker.
So,
yeah.
Sorry, in the chat, would you be able to just make a loaf now? I think with the bannock.
Make a loaf?
Yeah.
I'm assuming, Vanessa, would you be able to make a loaf? Like, I know with these, they rise, they don't go out. I don't know how you would do it as a loaf. Any ideas, Vanessa?
We've never made it as a loaf, and I've never personally seen it done as a loaf. We've always made it in a cookie sheet. So it was spread out because it would rise enough. I'm assuming you could try it as a loaf. It'd probably be just a little, you'd have to cook it a little longer. Because it was going to be in a loaf pan, it would probably have to be cooked a little longer with maybe the temperature down a little bit lower.
Okay. Yeah, so I made mine quite thick this time, so we'll see how they work out. I put my timer on for 15 minutes, but the recipe does say anywhere from 15 to 20. So I think mine are going to need a bit longer because they are thicker, but they say go until they're golden brown. So we're going to aim for that. So now I'm just
Tatiana, we
gonna,
have,
yeah.
sorry, I'm just going to mention that we have some people who are following with you. So some people are making the panic burgers with you.
Awesome. Well, now I know that I'm going to call on some people to help me taste it and tell everyone how it tastes. So thank you, Rose, for sharing that with me. Okay.
Okay, and someone else is frying the bannock at the moment. So do you usually fry it or just put it into the oven?
So bannock, that is, so I guess every nations call it different things. Bannock in our community is considered something that you would cook in the oven. And if you were going to be frying it, it was called fry bread or scone.
Mm.
Yeah. So, and the recipes are different. So bannock, you would use lard. Whereas if you were frying it, you would use, you wouldn't use any oil or lard at all in the recipe for scone or fry bread.
Okay, yeah, so we're popping it in the oven. So I already popped mine in there. And as I mentioned, I put the timer on for 15, but I think it's gonna need a bit longer because I made mine nice and big. They're so yummy. So now I'm gonna start doing the burgers. So it says ground meat. So whatever ground meat you have, it might be wild, it might be from the grocery store. If you're a vegetarian, it might be a ground veggie meat. Not actually, it's a meat alternative, but anyway, so I'm using beef today. I went for the extra lean, whatever suits you and your fancy, you can do. I'm gonna pop that in here. It was really interesting with this recipe. Every time I
use circles for your bun, or no?
Sorry, I think we have a question. Yeah, go ahead now.
Was your bannock cut out in circles for the oven?
Yes. So remember, I took the cookie cutter and I made this little circle. So mine are in circles. Is that the question?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it was just hard to see you.
Oh, so sorry. Yes. So I made them in little cookie cutters. I can show you here. Let me pop them out of the oven and show you. So mine are like little circles. They kind of look like
cool. Thank you.
So as I mentioned, I made them a lot bigger this time to make my family happy, because that's what obviously we're going to be having this for supper tonight. So it's going to be great to eat all together. So now I'm going to get started on the burgers. And I do encourage you to heat up your skillet or your pan so that it's ready. So medium heat, and just throw about a tablespoon of oil in there. So I'm going to use the vegetable oil because I already have it out. So if you want to do that. And I am using a cast iron pan, which is really great for somebody that is a vegetarian or a vegan eater, because the cast iron actually releases iron into the food, and that's a good way to get some more iron into their diet. Whereas if you are an animal eater, so like beef, this will have lots of iron in it, but I do have this pan, and it's one of my favorite pans, so I will be using it. So double the iron today. So yeah, letting that heat up. And now we're gonna go ahead and add the seasoning to it. So the recipe just called for salt and pepper into the meat. And which was, I was mentioning earlier, I was really surprised because every time I've made burgers, I've always put breadcrumbs or eggs or something into it. So this was a nice simple recipe. That said, I love spice. So this is where you can get adventurous and throw in any spices that you enjoy. So in addition to the salt and pepper, so I'll do salt and pepper, but I'm also going to add some garlic powder and some onion powder, okay? So on here, it says to season, so to your liking. So I just sprinkle some in, nicely over top. I love garlic, so I always add lots of garlic, and then some onion powder. And we're just going to mix it up. And again, using my hands. Hands never disappoint. I'm just gonna mix it up, kind of knead it like I did the dough. So you can see, just mixing it all together. And then I'm gonna make patties. Now, the recipe says 4. Depending on what size of burger you wanna make, it might be 2, or maybe you wanna make small, like slider more burgers, and then change your bannock size as well. So then maybe you're making like 6, but really go for what's best for you. I'm probably gonna turn this into maybe 3, maybe 2, because I like my burgers big and juicy. And that's perfect. So I just rip it off and make my patties. So depending, I want mine a bit bigger. When you make them, I'm gonna just squish mine down like this into that desired size and shape. And then I'm just gonna pop it in the pan. I like to do 2 at once in my pan because my pan is big enough to accommodate 2. But if you have a smaller pan, maybe you just want to cook 1 at a time. So you'll hear a little bit of a sizzle when you drop it onto that oil. So yeah, I think mine's gonna make 3, but in the interest of time, I'm just gonna make 2 right now. So again, form it whatever size and shape looks good to you. And pop that in. And the recipe does say about 6 minutes per side. So I'm gonna watch that. And we got the bannock in the oven. I'm gonna quickly wash my hands because I was touching raw meat. And then we're gonna head over and start making the corn salsa.
So Vanessa, you mentioned meat is really common into indigenous food and recipes. Like specifically for the ground beef, what do you usually do with it other than burger?
So for the ground beef, my mother would, when we would catch an animal, we had a butcher in our area that would butcher our moose completely, or deer. And so in that process, they would do steaks, roasts, and beef, ground meat. So it was ground. And so my mother would make, because we were a big family, she had to make meals that were, that would spread and be able to feed everybody. So we ate a lot of chili, stews, spaghetti. So our common meals, and everything was made from scratch. So I didn't grow up with frozen foods at all. I didn't even know that existed until I moved off and went on my own. I didn't know you could buy pizza already pre-made, or chicken fingers, or all that kind of stuff, because my mother made everything. So I had no idea that this stuff existed until I left my community. But yeah, so no, the ground beef, ground moose meat or deer meat would be used in chilies and dishes that were where she made a lot of it in a big pot. So, and my mother's pots were large. So when I went off on my own, I learned how to cook. I learned how to cook growing up through my mother. And I had a hard time trying to cook for one person, just myself, because I was on my own. My pots were all small. I knew how to cook everything in big. Everything was big. There were no, we used 3 cans of tomatoes as opposed to, a smaller family using 1 can of tomato for spaghetti sauce. Everything was a lot larger. So yes, you have to learn how to cook for one person. It was an adjustment.
And I think you mentioned like you're using all the animal parts, right?
Yes. So, yeah, because, and my mother made it, we made it really, it was really important to our family that when we when we caught an animal and we were using it, it was important that we used everything that we could possibly use. She would even use the tongue of a moose because she would make pâtés. So at Christmas time, she would put those away. She'd freeze them and put them away and pull them out at Christmas time and make pâtés with them. And so it was just really important that we used all the parts of the animal. The heart would be also cooked because, yeah, it was senseless to only take the animal's life and to only use specific part of the animal or specific, some people would only use the meat part, but there were so many nutrients that came from the other parts that people weren't aware of, that people aren't aware of, or people don't know how to cook them. But my mother, being very knowledgeable in cooking all parts of the animal, yeah, she cooked a lot of it. Yeah, so people, even the moose nose, she would use the nose as well for pate. That was another thing that she would use. So yeah, hi Barbara. Yeah, so it was really important that we used all parts of the animal.
That's awesome.
That's so interesting. So guys, I just went ahead just for the interest of time here. I kept going. So I rinsed the corn just like I did the lentils. And then I cut up the green onions and I washed them ahead of time. Just cut them up and put them in there. And then a teaspoon of the chili powder. And then I'm going to go ahead and mix that. I'm also making my side salad to go with my bannock burger. I have flipped the patties, so allowing them to cook on the other side. With a salad, I always encourage you to use whatever's in the fridge, whatever really makes you happy and makes your taste buds happy. I like to use up any fresh ingredients that I have when I'm making a side salad, or maybe I didn't have anything and I went out and got the right items for that salad. So I'm using a spinach leaf. You can use any types of the recipe did talk about like romaine lettuce. You could do that as well. I had some little carrot shreds in my fridge to use up. So I'm going to use those in my salad, and then some grape tomatoes. So I just went ahead and sliced the tomatoes in 4. So now I have my little side salad, and you could put feta cheese on there. You could put Parmesan on there. You can add whatever dressing you love. Really make it your own and do what feels good to your body. I'm just making a small portion, but if you're making it for a full family, you might want to make a bigger portion. So I'm going to mix up this now. I'm just going to grab a spoon. Mix that up. And then while we're waiting for the bannock and the burgers to finish up, we're going to do what our parents told us never to do, and we're going to have our dessert first, and we're going to give that a try. And then we can open up the line for questions after we taste that. And once that bannock and the burgers are ready, we will get the audience to try it for us and tell us how it tastes. So there's the corn slaw that is going to go on top of the burger in as a fixing. I encourage you to use whatever fixings you like and whatever condiments you like on your burger as well. So I'm going to go grab the lentil bite. And depending on the flour that you use, it will kind of have a different texture or consistency and maybe look a little bit different. But this is what mine looks like. And I'm going to give it a try and let you know how it tastes. I got a big bite of chocolate chips. That's my favorite. So mine's still warm, which I love. Would go so nice with a glass of milk. It's a soft texture, and I taste that cinnamon and that chocolate. And I don't taste the lentils. Oh, our bannock might be ready. So that's super delicious. Anyone in the audience tried theirs and want to let us know how they like it?
Yeah, you can post into the chat if you have tried it and let us know how it tastes.
So as I guessed, my bannock is still not golden brown because I made them quite thick. I'm going to put them in for another 5 minutes and then we'll check them. But as we're waiting for that to finish up, does anyone have any specific questions for me, or maybe Vanessa or Rose or anyone on the team?
Yeah, you can type in your questions either into the Q&A tab at the bottom, or just like use raise hand function, and then we could unmute you to ask your question live.
And Rose, can you just let me know if any questions do come through, as I don't see the chat myself?
Sure, yeah. So now you're gonna do the presentation.
I'm just gonna get my salad ready here.
I think, Tatiana, the beauty of this recipe that there are ingredients in every home. Like, this is how I felt. Like the salad, we usually have some sort of vegetables. We can pick whatever in the fridge.
Exactly.
And I usually use like the ground beef. So I usually find it easy like to make any recipe with the ground beef because it cooks very quick and it needs like 20 minutes and then it's ready. So I think this is awesome. With the lentil, I said like I usually also use it in my recipes. So it's nice just to try it as dessert. I had never done that before, but I think, as you mentioned, like the taste was awesome, and so I will try it.
Yeah, so I always say that with my clients. Don't be afraid to put lentils or beans. Even I like black beans and brownies, right? Those different types of protein sources into our baking and really play with it. They don't need to be only in like a meal, right? It's great to add them wherever we can so we get the nutrient benefit from them. The other thing I wanted to mention, I do find it really handy to have baked salads on hand in your fridge. If you find that, you know, maybe one day you're really busy, you know, you're gonna be working late or studying late, and these are just quick open and ready to go, no prep required. And they come with the sauce in there as well and some yummy toppings. So I always like to have 2 or 3 of these on hand for those days where you just need a quick option. Even though this salad took no time to make, it's still enough time on a busy day. So these are nice to have, and there's a variety of different types and flavors, so you can really play with it. So my burgers are done, and my bannock is just a little behind schedule. So I turned off my stove, and I'm gonna remove it from the heat and keep it in the pan to keep it a bit warm, but to stop it from cooking any further. I'm gonna go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I think, Tatiana, the options of the salad that you have presented, just one question about it. Like, usually it costs more when you buy those items, or I think many of the times I saw them on sale because they have to sell quick. So if you grab something on sale, like on reduced prices, I think it makes it works, and just do it at the same time that you pick the item. But I also agree that sometimes, yeah, you would find it hard a bit to do salad. So this is really a good quick option.
Yeah, so these are definitely more pricey. But for convenience wise, it might be a benefit for you. And the ones that are 50% off, yeah, I would just encourage you to try and eat those as soon as possible because they will probably spoil pretty soon. Usually they'll say on there, try and consume the night of or the day of purchase. So just keep that in mind if you are going to those 50% off ones. But yeah, these can be a little bit pricier because they're already packaged and cut for you. So you're kind of paying for that. But for those busy days, it might be worth a little bit more money.
Yeah.
Even though they do cost a little bit more, the nice thing I like about those bag salads is that you don't necessarily have to use the whole package that night. You can take out exactly what you need for that night, because if you're only cooking for 1 or 2 people, you don't necessarily need that whole bag. So only putting half of the bag or what have you, and half of the side ingredients that they give you, along with the, and then just closing them back up, putting them back in the fridge for another day, which is also really handy.
Yeah, I totally agree. So that's a great point, is maybe don't put all the dressing on it. It might go soggy. So just put it on your portion so that you can save the rest for later. So if you mix it all in a big bowl, it could go soggy and might not taste the best the next day. So yeah, thanks, Vanessa. So the bannock says, my timer says it's ready. So I'm going to have a quick check on it.
It's also just a reminder time for questions. So if anyone had a question, please post it.
Yeah, so you'll see here on the sides, it's like lightly browned. So I'm gonna call those done, and I'm just gonna let them cool a little bit so that I can touch it. And once it's cooled, I'm actually gonna cut mine in half to make my family happy. And we're gonna put the burger inside with the corn slaw. And if anyone in the audience is a step ahead, maybe they didn't make theirs so thick, do you want to try the recipe and let the audience know how it tastes? And then I know we need to head off to our chat with Barbara. She has lots to tell us about, so we're really excited for that. So if anyone has a step ahead and can try the recipe for me and help me out, that'd be amazing. Otherwise, we'll do it in a bit.
I don't see hands.
I just have one quick little comment to say about the bannock. So when you're checking the bannock, we don't normally stick a toothpick in like you would any baked goods. So what we would do is to check to see if it's ready, because even if it's brown outside, depending on the heat, or everybody's ovens are different, they cook faster or they cook slower. But if it's brown and you think that it's been in there long enough, if you take it and you tap on the center of the bannock with your finger, and you hear a hollow sound, like you hear, like it sounds hollow, like your bannock, it sounds hollow. You'll hear a hollow. I think that's the only way I can explain it.
That's so cool. I heard it.
That'll tell you that it's ready. And if you don't hear that hollow sound, you need to put it in a little bit lower, a little bit longer. That's it.
Mine are really hot to touch, so I'm gonna let Barbara take it away, and I can show you the presentation at the end, but I don't want to take up too much of Barbara's time here, so we'll move forward with it, and in the background maybe I'll just be making setting it up.
Sigwan, happy spring, everyone, and hello, Minapomadzo, and hope you're all living your life in a good way. I'm really sorry that I'm just joining in. Everything looks so delicious. You've got my mouth watering, and I called my husband up to come and see your bannock, because we are definitely going to have bannock burgers one of these soon. So. You know, food, of course, was so important to our people, and you know, it was sustainability. It was, you know, it was the strongest connection to our culture other than language. And you know, all the nations across North America gathered together to trade. You know, even though we didn't have airplanes, we didn't have highways, they came and they traded with one another. And you know, we used those rivers, those highways. They were for travel, and of course we got a lot of our food supply. We got those fish that again kept our people so healthy, surviving on the fish, both in the summer, spring, fall, winter. And you know, that how important that was, all those ways of sharing meals. And when those people got together, they did not speak each other's languages. So but they shared meals together. And we know when we share a meal, we don't have to have the same language. We share a meal, we become friends. And you see the joy on people's faces when they are sharing food together. They don't have to know each other, but if you are going to see the joy. And so these were a way of connect. Food was a connector, and a very positive connector, just as language. And you know, when you hear the old people talk about food, food was about your mind, your body, and your spirit. It fed everything. And especially when you shared it with someone, and they always shared with one another. They always took the time to whatever one person had. If one person killed a moose, everybody in the community ate. So that sharing was so important. That was the sustainability of a community. And every season brought its own foods to our people. You know, right from the spring, from that sap from the maple trees or the birch trees, and the fiddleheads and the dandelion leaves. You know, the in the summer, the wild carrots, leeks, and mushrooms, and the berries, the cherries, nuts, fish, rabbit, partridge. You know, again, the fall. You know, learning how to mix those berries, those things with meat, to dry them, to sustain them through the long winter. And even though during the winter they still snared, they still trapped, and had animals, fresh meat, but it was much harder to come by. You know, everything today seems so simple. We go off to the grocery store and we buy meat, we buy everything is there for us. But when we think of the people, the hard work that they had to do to go out and get that food. And I say, you know, that again, when we talk about food being spirit, we think about those when you took that sema, held that sema in your hand in the morning, and you were going out to hunt to feed your family, to feed your community, and you talked, you communicated with Creator, and what you needed, and at the same time, Creator was communicating with the animals, and animals would choose to give up their lives to sustain your family. So again, when that animal was killed, came and gave up its life, you put more of that sema down, that tobacco down for them, so that their spirit would live on, and again, to be there for the next generation. So these are, you know, it is very much about mind, body, and spirit, and understanding that we cannot, how everything, the earth provides everything we need to live our life in the good way, that we couldn't have done it on our own, that Creator planned and placed everything here that we needed before he placed human beings here. Because had he placed us here first, we would not have been able to survive. We need the gifts, we needed the help from every animal, every plant here, and everything was used here on the land for our health, and we were healthy in those days. And I've heard of that many times, that when the priests first came and saw us, when those people came here and they saw our people, they were amazed with how strong even our old women were. The old women were stronger than most of them because they ate well. They fed their mind, their body, and their spirit with all the good things. So I think I'm going to stop a little bit, and people can have questions, or we can share some more. But I think we should see that beautiful plate that Tatiana prepared. Or Rose, do you have something you want to? Oh, there. She's back. Let her show this beautiful food for us.
Okay, so my bannock, as I said, I made it really thick. This was really thick, so I cut it in half. But it looks so delicious with the burger and then the side salad. I'll probably put a lot of other condiments on it, so maybe some mustard or ketchup, because that's how I love mine. But is anyone in the audience wanting to try it and let us know how it tastes?
I'm not sure, Tatiana, but I think some people still having difficulty accessing the event. I just get a message. So I'm really sorry for that. I'm not sure what's the issue, but I want to say that the event is recorded, so we can share it later on with whoever did not able to attend. So that's why maybe we don't have followers who are doing the recipe, but here's one comment. I'll try that one. So yeah, let us know. How does it taste?
Okay, you're gonna come over and try mine. I think that's what it.
So sorry, my panic burger turned out pretty good.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm not going to try it in front of you because look how big that burger is, and it might not be a pretty sight, but I promise you I'm going to enjoy this after. And I want you guys to try and let me know what you think, but maybe I went a little too thick and a little too juicy with my burger, but that's how I love it. So thanks, Barbara, for giving me that moment to share it with everyone and show everyone, but we'll take it back to you, or any questions.
Thank you, Tatiana. It looks so delicious. I'm so looking forward to a burger. We don't normally eat burgers in the winter. I'm so looking forward to one, and we are definitely going to do it with the bannock for sure. So any chance we get to have bannock, and you know, I use that tapping on it. It really does work. And when Vanessa, of course, was talking about how all the parts of, like the moose, even the tongue, the nose, and what a delicacy the nose was, and so many nutrients from that nose. And I know I saw a demonstration of some women one day, and they had I don't even know what you call them, but it's like a flare. It's not a lighter, but it's for welding sort of. And they were cleaning out the nose hair out of the moose as part of cleaning it in preparation for putting it into their stock to cook that nose. So I'm not that adventurous. I've often said, I think maybe there was days I would have starved. I would be a lot better off for it if I had if I said no to some food. But unfortunately, I say yes to those bad things like potato chips. Anyway, so yeah, our connection to food was the beginning of everything, because we can't survive, you know, without that, without feeding our bodies, and with those healthy ways. And today, you know, everything is fast, and it's bad for you. You know, our people, everything they would say, if it ran or if it flew, you could eat it. If it just stood there, it's really not good for you. And so they had to work for that food, for everything that provided for a family, for a community. And you know, food was so important that, again, all our moons, our months were named after the food that was available in each nation during certain times of the year. So right now we're in the goose, the Nikikisis, the goose moon, and because the geese are returning, and so our people would have eaten a lot of goose over that fire pit, and if you've smelt goose roasting on an open fire and tasted it, there is nothing like it. So again, the smells, even we know when we walk into a house for a gathering and you smell all those smells that someone has taken the time and to prepare a meal for us, and the love, the heart that goes into preparing those meals. And that's what it was in the old days, with much more difficulty. And I love the shows where I see those old people cook and tease these young chefs that are with these old Native women teasing these young chefs and saying and they said, take the heat down, and the young chef is saying, I know how to do that on my gas stove at home, but how do I do it when I'm cooking with a full fire underneath my pot here, And they're laughing at him. But again, they're in cooking, in sharing a meal, there is joy. There is you're always not only just feeding your body, you are feeding your mind and your spirit as well. So Rose, did you have any questions?
Yeah, this is really interesting, Barbara, what you have saying. I think food sharing, and the gathering itself we are born to be socially active. So when we do that, we nourish ourselves with having the talk and the food and the good times that we do not forget. But I have a question. Do you usually do the gatherings in a very large numbers, or is it usually like you will have someone coming into your home every weekend and you will have 10 people at a time, but it's only during weekend time? Is it something like every day or just the weekend?
Well, no, of course, in community, it's a little bit different. When I grew up, my parents had 13 kids. So we were a big family. We never invited anybody for a meal because there was just enough, basically, room for us. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because we had to leave the reserve whenever I was young, because my mother had tuberculosis, so there was some health reasons there, and to save us from being separated from myself and my next brother to me, to be adopted out. We and the other kids were going to go to residential school. My father was able to leave the reserve, and so we didn't even grow up around family or community in it. So our family, our feasts were basically every day, but it was just our family, and so and when I think of the Christmases that when I was growing up, and my husband said when he came into our family, he said he never saw in his life at the end of the meal the turkey that was dry bone. There was not one piece of meat on it left anywhere, and it was totally dry bone. And but everybody had such their fill, and all the other things that went along with that turkey. But but in communities there would be regular feasts, and of course and they celebrated many things, whether it was births, whether it was in death, like there was the gatherings that people would be together, and there was always a lot of food. And I remember those funerals when I was a little girl, going to my grandparents' house, and the funeral, the wake was there in their home, and there was people in the kitchen cooking while this wake was going on, and there was people bringing food, and people knew when that black wreath was hung on the door with that purple ribbon, that there was a wake going on in that home, and you could stop there and eat, and even if you didn't have anything to bring, because you were celebrating that person's life, and to honor that person, and everyone knew one another. So there was that gathering, that community time. We celebrated the season, so there was always feasts happening on a weekly or monthly basis, not on a daily basis, but like I say, when somebody in the community did kill a moose back, and I'm talking back when the community was much smaller, everybody benefited from that kill. So that sharing was so important.
Interesting, really interesting. Vanessa or Marie-Pierre, do you want to add?
Yeah, no, I was just, everything that Barbara's saying is true. And going back to my childhood, having grown up on my First Nations, when we got together as a community, it was really important to all of us. And like the passing of somebody, and I remember more so when somebody was passing, when somebody had passed, it was really important for the community to help that family. And our way of showing our help was by, my mother would make, if somebody passed away, and even if it wasn't in our close family, but it was the neighbor or our friends down the road, she would make a big pot of chili, or she would make sandwiches, or she'd make some desserts or some bannock, and she would put that together and she would bring it to that family. So she wouldn't be making it for us. She would bring it so that family didn't have to worry about food for a while, for a couple of days while they're going through this grieving process. And that was really important to our community, to make sure that we all helped one another. And then food, going back to food, we had a big family, so to feed as well. There were 11 children, so 12, 13, same thing. When we sat down to dinner, my mother always anticipated somebody showing up. So whether it be my uncles who never married, lived on their own, so they were always welcome to come in and have dinner with us. So, usually one of my uncles would show up and sit with us, or one of our school friends, one of our friends or cousins that for whatever reason were at our house at the time we were eating a meal. My mom would just feed them as well, and then send them on their way. So it was just really important to feed everybody. And I think you take that away. As growing up, I now am the same way. I always want to feed everybody. I'm always, people come over, and even if it's not a meal time, I'm quickly prepping something to put out, because I think it's important to feed, regardless of whether they're hungry or not. I want that opportunity that they have something to take in, or to feed themselves, and it's really important. Food is a really important part of our life, and food and how it's prepared and served, and yes, the work that goes into it. You appreciate the food more knowing the hard work that's put into that dish. So my mother taught us, as growing up, even though she cooked the meal, we all had to take part in whether I had to peel the potatoes or whether I cut the potatoes. She wouldn't have us prepare the whole meal, but the things that would help her is peeling the carrots. So she would get us to do those things, cleaning up the dishes around her as she's cooking, so that there weren't a big pile of dishes at the end of the meal, when we were done. So all the family got involved. We all got involved. We all took part in preparing that meal. So I'm thankful to my mother for doing that, because it taught me how to cook and how to appreciate the food that I'm making and that I'm serving everybody. And it allows them to appreciate the meal that they're receiving.
I took part in one day in the Pioneer Woman's Cookbook that has been rewritten, and in it there was her recipes, but there was also stories. And she talked about how even with them that often they, maybe at 8-10 o'clock at night, there'd be a bang at your door, and you'd open your door, and she said there would be some Indians who wanted to come in and sleep by the fire. And that was the way back then. It was the way of our people, and it was, I think, the way a lot of the pioneers expected to live as well. And these people, these men would come in and they would lay down there by the fire and fall asleep. And she said, she wrote in this cookbook that in the morning they would get up again before dawn, but the Indians would be gone. And she says outside their door there would often be 4 or 5 rabbits hanging by their door. So they had left their payment for having shared the family, having shared their fire, sharing that, and that's what we do when we share our food, our home, our fire. We are taking care of one another, and that's the way it was supposed to be. That's the way our people live, by taking care of one another. And Vanessa and I remember it as funerals most of the time, because and that's the way it was, that the food was it was part of the celebration. It was part of honoring, taking care of one another. And just as those animals take care of us, we have a responsibility to take care of them, so that they will be here for the next generation, and in the same good, healthy way that our people had it.
Can you share the meaning behind the spirit plate?
Sure. It's so important when we think about that spirit plate, and people forget, because we are so often today, everything is so busy. We forget about those who have moved on to the spirit world. But those ones that went to the spirit world are still watching out over us. Our mothers, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers from generations back still watch over us. And we need to respect them and remember that we have not forgotten them. Even those we didn't know that watch over us, they are still part of our life, and we are part of their life. So when we gather for a feast, and we should do it on a regular basis. Like I have all of the deaths of the anniversary dates of my siblings that I've lost, and I always think about them on those days, and I always try to put out some food, for them on their birthdays, something that they like to eat, something for me to think about them. And but we put a little bit of whatever we are going to eat, and especially those wild, for my father to put out some whitefish, which he really loved, and put out some bannock, he called it la galette, and to put that out on, and just a little bit, because unlike us, the spirits are not greedy. They just need a little bit to nourish themselves. And it's really about remembering, about knowing that we are thinking about them. We are feeding their spirits, just like they know, like that we know they are still feeding our spirits, because they are part of us, that we remember who they are. And for me, just a few years ago, when during the after the Walking with Our Sisters installation at Carleton, they asked me if I would have that bundle in my home, and the bundle was almost like a semi-truckload full, and they wanted me to keep everything in the same room, and those vamps from the Walking with Our Sisters, those thousands of vamps those boxes had to be touching at all times. And here in my living room, I moved all the furniture out of my living room and my dining room, and put all everything from the bundle, but those boxes, 36 boxes of vamps had to be touching one another, and it looked like a big, huge casket in the middle of my living room. And I had covered it in red cloth, and I had some sage and some cedar and on top of that, and it was one casket, but of thousands of women who had been murdered, that was here in my home. And I sang for that bundle every day. And every day, whatever meal we had, I would make a spirit plate for those women. And I did it every meal because I had to feed a lot of those spirits, and to know that they were important, that they were not forgotten, that they were very much part of my life now. And I put fresh water out for those women every day, and I sang for them, because this is what we do for spirit. And those in turn, those women would take care of me, because I just 2 years ago, I was in Thunder Bay traveling with the MMIWG inquiry, and I had a fall down a stairwell one day. And when I fell down the stairs, I bounced down the first couple of steps at the top, and I was trying to grab hold of that handrail, and I could not reach it. And I was really afraid. I don't fall well. I got, somehow I was panicking, and I could not reach that railing. And all of a sudden I felt a hand touch my face and said, "It's going to be okay, Barbara." And it was as clear as I am talking to you right now. And I just let go and let myself fall. And somehow I got myself turned around, and I fell on my back. My husband jokes that I fell like a stunt man, and because if you fall on your back, you do less damage. And I fell on my back, and my head hit that marble floor, and I didn't get hurt. And I believe those spirits that I had taken care of here in my home, that I spoke to and sang for every day, were there when I had that fall. And it was some of those women that somebody touched my face and said, "It's going to be okay." And as I say, those spirits, we feed, we create that spirit plate, a little bit of our gathering, of whatever we eat for those relatives, those spirits that we love, that often we don't even know we loved, but they have loved us. When our great grandmothers prayed for their child, they were praying for us. Because I know, as I pray for my little granddaughter now, I am praying for her great grandchildren. And I want to always a spirit plate for me, because I will always be watching over them. So Vanessa, I hope that explains a bit enough about the plate. And any other questions?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
That reminds me, we did community round downs in college. Of course, when we were at the campus at that time, and there was no COVID, but I remember that it's of like a celebration of the spirits, and it's to celebrate death as well. So it reminded me of the same thing. And we had like a very big feast, and everyone shared food, and then we did like a round dance. I think the movement that we were doing, as if we're connecting with the Northern Lights, and with connecting with the spirits. So it was great. Like that, I remember that because you mentioned like the relationship between food and the spirits. And
Yeah. Well,
I
spirit and food, we're very
Oh,
connected. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just had a quick question for you, Barbara. Is it common to burn the sage, or did you just place the sage on top of the bundle?
I had sage on the bundle. As a matter of fact, some of it is still here. Some of this sage was still was on that bundle of those vamps together. And but typically we burn sage for ceremony, for, you know, to smudge, and it's again, that is to feed our mind, body, and spirit. When we smudge, we are asking Creator to cleanse our hands, so that everything we touch is done in a good way, to cleanse our heads, our minds, so we understand all the things we need to understand, to cleanse our eyes, to see the beauty in everyone and everything, to cleanse our ears so we hear what we need to hear, not just what we want to hear, and to cleanse our mouth, to speak the truth, and to remind us that, especially when we talk about other human beings, and to cleanse our hearts so that our hearts are open, and cleanse our feet to remind us to walk with respect on our earth, who provides everything we need to live. Just as a mother provides everything for her children, our Mother Earth is providing everything we need for us. But you know, when I was asked to have that bundle in my home, and I've always been afraid of spirits. I've always been afraid of dead people. And my father used to say to me, Barbara, you don't have to be afraid of the spirits, the dead ones. They won't hurt you. He said, the living ones are the ones you need to be afraid of, not those who are gone. They don't want to hurt you. If they come, it's not because they want to hurt you. And you know, when that bundle was going to come, and my husband said to me, are you okay with having all those spirits in our house? And I said, yes, I think I am. And I shouldn't go into the story of what happened, but because we're talking about food, but something really wonderful happened because of those spirits in my home. And the sage is a protector. It's you know, it's taking away negativity, and I wanted those women to know that they were loved. And when they were here, that bundle was in my home for 8 days, and I never left my home in those 8 days. Because when we have someone in our home, we cook for them, we take care of them, we don't just let them in our home and we go out and enjoy ourselves. So those women were taken care of while they were in my home, and I spoke to them, and I talked to them about, you know, I had met some toads in my life. I always talk about the toads that we as young women meet in our life, but I told them about my husband and the wonderful man he is. And I said, when you come back into this world again, I hope you will meet somebody. If you go through this world again, that I hope you will meet somebody like him. And but I always wanted to take care of those spirits, that in that way we were intended to take care of one another, and not think of any person as less than, because those women were loved but seemed to have been forgotten. But I wanted them to know, while they were with me, I was going to feed them, both their spirit, their physically, with food, with fresh water, with songs for them, just as I did when we were part of the Walking with Our Sisters. Every morning we would get there and we would sing them awake a happy song. And at night, when we calm their spirit, we'd sing them a lullaby to calm their spirit, so that they would be calm overnight there. And I wanted to do that as part of my home too. So
I didn't know this. This is the first I'm hearing of this, and I want to say thank you for doing that. That touches my heart, because I had a friend who passed, and it wasn't a pleasant death. So yes, so I want to say thank you, because I didn't know that you did that, and it makes me feel good to know that you took care of her.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Good, Vanessa. Those women were all special. Any other questions about food or them or the?
If you have any question from Onaki you want to highlight, we still have like around 5 minutes.
Hi, so we did have one question. I suppose this would be, it's about bannock. So it's common knowledge that berries are put into bannock as well as like a sweet treat, but have any of you heard about other types of bannock that include other things than berries?
Yeah, so it depend on the season. So whatever the season, like Barbara was saying, the foods, whatever the season was. So yeah, my mom would put berries in. She would also, in the fall, she would put cranberries in. So she would make a savory bannock, and she would put cranberries in that we would collect in a low marsh that was close to where we grew up. In the winter time, she would do the bannock with, she would do raisins. So raisins, yeah, I guess you can get at the store. So she would put raisins in as a treat. That was a treat. Berries in the summer. And then in the spring, which would be April and kind of March, April, she would, and when the sap was running, because we would also collect sap from the trees that were around us. She would do the maple syrup. So we should make a bannock, and we would actually, what we would do, this is fun because I think everything was always based around food, but when it was maple syrup time, we would go out into the bush where we would have trees where my brothers and father would have tapped trees and collected all the sap. And then we'd make a big fire, and my dad would bring all the stuff for the fire pit, and we'd put the sap in a big pot and let it boil down until it turned into the sap. And it was an all day process. We started first thing in the morning, and by late in the afternoon, would become syrup. It took a long time, but we would do. And when that first syrup would be ready, while we were waiting for that syrup, my mother would bring ingredients for bannock, and she would make bannock, and she would get us some sticks. My brothers would go collect sticks, and we would take that bannock and wrap it around the stick at the end of the stick, and we would hold it over the fire. It had to be up high enough from the fire that it was only collecting the heat. And we would cook, and then we would slowly turn that. You look back now and you look at, like, my grandkids, I think about my grandkids, if they would be able to have the patience to stand there and hold that bannock over that fire, I don't think they would. It wasn't something they knew, but for us growing up, we knew that we had to patiently so it taught us patience. It taught us to be patient with that cooking, because we had to hold the stick with our bannock on it and get it. And if we didn't do our own bannock, we didn't get a bannock. So that was the rule. If you want to have bannock and maple syrup, you have to cook your own bannock. So my mom would wrap it up for us onto the stick, but then we had to stand there and hold that bannock. And so the patience that we gained from being able to wait for that bannock to cook. And we were so excited once that bannock cooked, because then, and they had timed it so that we would start cooking that bannock just before my dad would say, okay, the maple, so that we'd all get a little cup of hot maple syrup, and we would get to dunk it into our bannock and eat it. It was so delicious. So yes, there's many ways that you can use bannock all through the season, every season, using whatever was provided.
And my mother used to, in the fall, she would make it, and with some apples and some cinnamon in her bannock. And we make one now out on our barbecue. And I use my cast iron frying pan, and it has some cream and some maple syrup all mixed together, and then poured onto the bannock as it's cooking out there on the barbecue. It is to die for. I don't think it's good for you in any way, shape, or form, but it's worth the eating it.
Yeah, that sounds so tasty. And I always like to say food is more than nutrients. And like you've mentioned many, many times, right? We eat for so many different reasons. So this is why I believe all foods fit, and it might, you know, we might be getting nutrients and pleasure from food, and that's perfectly fine. So it sounds like it makes your heart feel good when you eat it. So then I would say it's good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if we ate and with joy like that, we don't need to eat as much. We because it is about the company that we are sharing that meal with. And if we are just eating a meal alone, it can be the best meal in the world. It is not the same thing. But if we share a meal with somebody we love, we care about, that we wanted to cook for, I think you know, it's going to be delicious, and it's not going to be fattening. You know, because I think with laughter, we burn off some of those calories in, as you can see, I'm probably not getting enough laughter in my life. But that's what happens when you've been married 45 years to the same guy and locked up with him for a year on top of that. So.
I think this is really amazing. We only have 2 minutes left, unfortunately. And if anyone else would have a quick question, if not, then we'll move to Marie-Pierre to end our session. Okay, no questions. Thank you. The virtual mic to you, over, Marie.
So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that organized the activity and who participate to the activity. I think it was very fun to talk about our way we see food. We see food all. It was very interesting to see all the different culture and all our relationship with food. I hope you like the activity, and I hope you're gonna try the recipe and let us know if it's good.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Tatiana. And thank you for the Mami Doswin Center. Nathaniel is not with here, but they have also done good job with organizing the event. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a good day.
Yes, thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.